Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about OneE's newest offering, Virtual Desktop Experience. And our speakers today are going to be Freddie, the product manager for Virtual Desktop Experience, and myself, Sid Bhaskara, the product marketing manager for Virtual Desktop Experience. And today, we're going to be going over just OneE, a quick overview of the company. Then we'll be jumping into a VDX intro. And then Freddie here is going to be running us through a demo of VDX. And then we'll conclude this webinar with a Q&A. So if you guys can please put your questions into the chat, we'll be happy to answer those questions once we wrap up with the overview and the demo. So kind of jumping into the OneE overview, we really wanted to start with our purpose. At OneE, we reimagine how technology serves people and create new ways for IT to shape the future of work. And what that really means is we are thinking about DEX and how IT can implement the digital employee experience to shape the future of IT work. With that, we think of three core principles when we think of all of our offerings here at OneE. And that's to provide a better experience, to be more secure, and to be more business aligned. What do I mean by that when we say a better experience? We help ensure a digital friction-free employee experience that increases productivity, loyalty, and role satisfaction. Employee positive productivity time is maximized and experience attrition is reduced. When it comes to being more secure, we help reduce the risk of security compromise by ensuring devices remain compliant. So if a risk or a compromise is discovered, we can initiate real-time changes upon devices to limit the impact. And then lastly, what does it mean to be business aligned? We help preserve employee productivity and their ability to drive revenue through their activities and the customer experiences they deliver. We also help the management of costs associated with device support, hardware refresh, and software asset investment. So with that, I'd like to kind of jump into Virtual Desktop Experience, or VDX. So VDX is a capability of the OneE platform that provides end-to-end visibility of the VDI estate, facilitates proactive issue identification and remediation to provide a best-in-class digital employee experience. So how do we get here? For that, I'd like to kind of transition it over to Freddie, who's going to talk a little more bit about VDX and Virtual Desktop Experience. So Freddie, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Ed. Hi, everyone. It's Freddie here from the OneE product team. I'm just going to share my screen and we can go through VDX, including a demo. So how did we get here? So what I'm going to do now is take you a little bit around or through the context around VDX in terms of, what challenges we see in terms of VDI admins experiencing, day to day, and the challenges their users face. And then potential ways of tackling these challenges, and of course our kind of approach to this is VDX, and that kind of goes a good way towards solving these problems and challenges for not just our customers, but of course their end users as well. So first, let's go through some of the challenges, and this is one of the key ones. This quote, I think, really sums it up. So VDI is, of course, incredibly important to a large number of enterprises. It's a key investment on their tech stack that provides really important productivity tools to employees for all sorts of use cases. But that importance means that if something does go wrong, the impact can be, quite simply catastrophic very quickly. And I think this quote that I got from a customer really sums up the importance of VDI, which is that, whenever they have a VDI issue, it very quickly becomes a C-suite issue due to the impact, simply because the impact can just be so large, it can end up impacting, tens of thousands of users or employees very, very quickly. And when we zoom out, let's think about, some of the key things that are important when you think about VDI. So of course, there's multiple different factors here. From our perspective, we see it falling into three buckets really. So uptime and reliability, end user experience, and then resources and costs. So first, uptime and reliability. I think the key thing about VDI, again, is it's key for users' productivity. It's how they get their job done. They start work at the beginning of the day. They need to access a computer. And for VDI, that's going to be some kind of virtual compute. So let's say a VM or maybe a published application. And the key thing about that is it needs to be working, and it needs to be working almost like a utility. If you turn on a tap, water comes out, and it needs to be always available. And that's where uptime comes in. If that uptime, obviously 100% uptime is fundamentally impossible, but uptime, having it available for all working hours, is really important for VDI. And the other aspect of that as well is reliability. It might be working, but is it reliable? And that's things that we'll talk about in a second around, how long is the round trip time? What's the latency? Other things which make it a reliable resource that can help people be productive and to get their job done. The second piece is really around end user experience. Now, of course, DEX, that's kind of a key focus for us here at 1E. But really the key thing around this is, VDI is obviously a key investment. And the key thing there is you want your end users to be productive. And a key thing there is it being a good technology for them to use. So we'll be talking a bit about different aspects around VDI and, how there can be challenges there with the end user experience. And the third part of it, of course, is really around resources and costs and the investment involved. VDI is very often a very non-trivial investment for companies where they're provisioning and providing compute resource for tens of thousands of employees, and that means that there's a lot of cost to manage and try and optimize and report on. And also to make sure that that's managed as the company grows, because that is a very, very much a non-trivial investment. So those are kind of the three buckets we see it in terms of what's important with VDI. And then moving, to the need for VDX, there are, of course, some significant challenges around this as well. And of course, there's more than three. We can go through that in the Q&A as well if anyone got any comments on that. But the three in terms of the need for VDX are really poor visibility into the user experience, a lack of effective data for troubleshooting, and then also, crucially, a lack of integration with remediation tools to actually go and fix those problems. So firstly, let's talk about the poor visibility. So the key thing around a lot of VDI tech today, you might get a lot of data relating to that deployment. You can see how many sessions are happening, you can see network statistics and everything like that. But there is often quite a big gap in terms of the so what, in terms of what does this really mean for the end user in terms of, are they having a good experience? Are they having a difficult experience? How much of their productivity is really impacted by the VDI deployment? And oftentimes people are relying on surrogate or stand-in KPIs like login duration or round trip time, which often that could be quite effective for kind of estimating people's end user experience, but it's also not going to be accurate for much of the time as well. The second one is really around the lack of effective data for troubleshooting. So often, sometimes technicians are having to look for data in multiple different locations, or even they might be overloaded by data as well, where key insights are not really flagged and they're having to dig through way too much information. And this impacts troubleshooting in multiple ways. It makes it difficult to make an initial assessment in terms of how big is this issue, what other people impacted. It makes it difficult to really understand and carry out, the root cause analysis steps. And all that means that eventually the mean time to resolution, the MTTR, gets impacted because it just takes a long time to sort through that data and make effective data-driven decisions to take that issue to a close. And the third part is really around the integration of remediation tools. Something that we often say here at 1E is, it's great if you can detect problems in an environment, but if you're just observing a problem, that's only half the battle. Really, what you want to be doing is using and leveraging that data you have to actually solve that problem for the customer and, really improve their digital employee experience and their DEX. And that's why we see that as absolutely key. Having whatever product or solution you use to help manage the DEX of your VDI, if it's not integrating well with your remediation tools, then it just adds a layer of complexity in terms of actually fixing those issues and providing a world-class DEX for those VDI users. So those three areas, I think, really underline the need for VDX in this space. And so this is basically like a quick summary, I guess. We'll do a demo in a second, so we'll be going through the functionality. But this is the top four aspects as we see it in terms of what virtual desktop experience or VDX is bringing to the table. So the first one is really the infrastructure overview. So something that I touched upon earlier is access to data. That's really key for troubleshooting. And so with VDX, we have an end-to-end visibility of this data in terms of how the different parts of the VDI deployment are, connected together to broker connections and everything. And I'll go through that in the demo, and I'll talk through the value that brings. We've also got the user session data as well. So different information and in-depth data relating to each individual user, each session, each connection, to really help technicians, join the dots and discover critical insights in terms of what might be impacting an end user's decks and how to resolve that. The next one is around the automatic issues detection and remediation. So VDX out the box contains a number of automatic self-healing capabilities for common issues experienced across VDX environments. And this means, that those issues, when they do occur, there's no technician involved. They get fixed automatically, and the end user doesn't have to resort to, contacting a service desk and having that issue escalated to the VDI team. It just gets fixed straight away. And the third piece is around, seamless technician workflows. The key thing here, as I mentioned earlier, VDX is really built from the ground up to really integrate deeply with the rest of the 1E platform. And so that's capabilities such as 1E endpoint automation, 1E endpoint troubleshooting. And that really means that as a technician, you can really, take additional steps using our different capabilities very efficiently and very effectively without having to leave the product and log in somewhere else. What does that really mean? It means that if there are issues, then you can actually bring those to a close and resolve those much more efficiently just from within a single portal. So what we'll do is we'll do a demo, because I think that's the greatest way to really, portray how these capabilities all fit together. So I'm just going to exit this PowerPoint. We will return to that later when we do a little summary and go into the Q&A. So what you can see here is VDX. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a couple of key areas within VDX, and those are the infrastructure overview and the user sessions area as well. So something that I'll kind of clarify as well before we begin. So the first iteration of VDX is supporting, those Citrix on-prem or hosted on-prem use cases. And so what we've done here is we've basically installed some of our agents onto the Citrix infrastructure. So that means that we can gather data relating to that infrastructure and the user sessions. And we've also actually installed our own 1E client across as much of this as possible. And what this really means is we're kind of consolidating all this data in our SaaS platform, and then we can display in different ways. As you can see here, towards the top of the page, we're highlighting key insights relating to that VDI deployment. So, how many sessions there are, key metrics like, what is the average log-on duration, the average round trip time, which are really important to understand, how healthy that deployment really is. We've also got the VDX score. So this is something that we calculate algorithmically using a number of different parameters, much like the scores that we have in our other products like Experience Analytics. And this, again, provides really good visibility in terms of, is that VDI providing a good end user experience or not? And this is a replacement for stand-in KPIs like average login duration. If you've got a number of different VDI deployments, then you can, of course, go through these as well. So in this case, we've got London and Noida over in India. So if you have got large deployments, and then also we've got time, which I'll touch upon in a second when I go to a different page. But what we can see here in the main area is the actual topology. So this basically shows how my VDI deployment is really fitting together, starting with the end user connecting devices. That could be laptops, workstations, maybe even servers. And then how they connect through to different parts of the infrastructure. So my storefronts, my delivery controllers, my databases, to actually achieve an end-to-end connection, so that a user can connect to Citrix and get to that end user compute or a VM to actually go and do their work. So this provides really good visibility of how that all fits together. And because I've got the 1E client installed, we also get additional information showing right here in the topology. So for example, I can see CPU and memory usage, for example, and I can also actually click through directly to that device. And if I did that, I could start leveraging those capabilities of the wider 1E platform to look at additional device information, hardware data, software information, metrics, and also access to other capabilities like endpoint troubleshooting. So if I was working on an issue, I could start running a script on a device to gather additional diagnostics, or running a script to fix that issue straight away, all from within a single portal. I'm not having to access a separate product to carry this out. So this gives really good visibility to how everything fits together. But on top of this, we layer in these alerts. So I mentioned earlier that we have some alerting built into VDX. So you can see that on the right-hand side. A lot of these alerts are quite old because, yeah, I've been working hard on this infrastructure, so none of them are too recent. But basically, we have some automated alerts out of the box, and they're looking for different, resource spikes in most cases where different nodes in the topology might be under load. And if those have happened recently in the last 24 hours, they will actually show small badges on this topology. And so that provides really good visibility to technicians. When they're going onto this infrastructure overview, they can see very clearly which storefronts, for example, might be under load and, maybe in an unhealthy state, and that might be a root cause to some kind of issue that they're investigating. I mentioned time earlier, and that factors in here as well. So this page, we can roll back up to 7 days. Very useful for common VDI issues where issues might be quite transitory. So, they're difficult to investigate, difficult to pin down. But also if people are not, reporting the issue when it happens, then being able to go back in time becomes really, really useful to really properly investigate those. So this is the infrastructure overview in a nutshell. As I mentioned, we've also got the user sessions area. So this is where we can see information relating to individual sessions and individual connections. And just like on the infrastructure overview, we provide things like key metrics around login duration and round trip time to give a really good visibility into how healthy is the VDI deployment. But of course, I can actually navigate to and click into individual sessions as well. So I can do that in a number of ways. I can search for the session by username, for example. I can actually sort by different parameters as well. So I can, let's say, look for users where maybe they've got a poor VDX score, or they've got a long round trip time, or latency, that kind of thing, or for different session status. So if they've had a kind of an issue, they've disconnected or something, then I can pinpoint those problematic sessions and start digging in more if I want to. But in this case, I'm going to go to a specific session. So I'm going to have a look at Tony Stark and have a look at his individual session. Oh, I clicked on the wrong button. There we go. So right now I'm going to have a look at Tony Stark and have a look at his user session. So here on this session details page, I can see in-depth information relating to that session. So, what site he's connected to, what desktop group he's connected to right now as well, and also that user-specific login duration and round trip time. If I click on one of his individual connections, we can see additional information. So I can see which parts of the VDI were used to broker that connection, which could be useful in a number of troubleshooting use cases. I can also see information like the performance. So I can see effectively time series data relating to things like their VDX score, their round trip time, and also the virtual workload. So the memory and CPU usage for their virtual workload to help understand if that might be a root cause or provide some hints into why they're experiencing issues. We also have a logon breakdown. And so this basically breaks down the different steps of logon, so authentication, entitlement, et cetera, to really help technicians understand, which of these might be causing, a long logon period and helping RCA and troubleshoot those. And then lastly, we've got user history. So just like on the infrastructure overview, you can go back a number of days to look at past sessions and connections, and that's really helpful, especially if the VDI issues are transitory in nature. They can be difficult to investigate. You might want to look through a number of sessions to really understand why a user is suffering from a poor digital employee experience for whatever reason. So that is virtual desktop experience in a nutshell. Of course, this was a very brief demo. So, if you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, as Sid mentioned earlier. But also, if you do want a more fleshed out demo, then please do reach out to your account team, and I'm sure they can accommodate you. So I'm just going to go back into the presentation now. Cool. So that was the demo of virtual desktop experience. So just to summarize what I showed you in that demo, so that there's 4 key capabilities to VDX. So the first one is that infrastructure overview. So as I mentioned, it's that topology showing your VDI end to end, really helping you understand that the VDI health, but also displaying alerts and potential issues on different parts of your infrastructure. I then showed you those user sessions where you can go in depth and look at individual sessions, and you can look at data around resource usage, how their experience is changing over time, to really help troubleshoot those issues and understand what might be the root cause. I showed or talked around the automatic issue detection and remediation as well. So out the box, we can start fixing these issues automatically. And lastly, I showed you around those seamless technician workflows. So the ability, because VDX is built really from the ground up as part of the One platform, the ability to leverage other capabilities like One endpoint troubleshooting to go into, let's say, endpoint troubleshooting and quickly gather diagnostics data or fix an issue, all from within the same portal, not having to go into completely separate products. So that's it from me in terms of the demo. I believe, Sid, we may have some questions. Should we start going through those?
Yes, we do. So let me pull up the chat over here and we can go through some questions.
Sure.
Okay, so I think some of these, Freddie, you probably have covered, but it'd probably be good to reiterate them. So the
Absolutely.
first one is, when will VDX be available?
Yep, that's a great question. So it actually released or launched on the 10th of July. So that was a week ago today. So yeah, it's available now. So just reach out to your account team if you'd like to get access.
Perfect. And then the next one, what VDI technology does VDX work with?
Yeah, good question. So the first iteration of VDX supports Citrix on-prem, and that includes on-prem and also hosted on-prem. Of course, if you've got any questions, especially because there are many different ways that you can deploy VDI, then please feel free to reach out to your account team, and they'll be able to clarify what configurations are supported.
And then along the same lines of VDI technology, will we extend VDX to work with other VDI technologies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the key thing is, for us, the product team at 1E, we're always listening to our customers and the wider market as well. So the first iteration is really focused around Citrix, but we're listening, and I've been speaking to customers on a daily basis around different directions that we can take this. And as you mentioned, Sid, we're constantly innovating, so we're always looking for how do we take this to the next level. So we haven't got anything that I can confirm or talk about today, but the key thing is, if you have feedback, please do get in touch with your account team and they'll pass on that feedback to the product team here at 1E.
Perfect. And then the last question for you, Freddie, are there
Yep.
any release notes for the group here that they can read to get some more details around VDX?
Yep, absolutely there are. So what we'll do is we'll make sure those release notes are sent to everyone after the webinar. And yeah, that they go through in detail effectively what I talked about today in terms of the core capabilities and how to use them.
Perfect. Well, this is very helpful. Thank you so much for your overview of VDX, Freddie. And then for the rest of the group here, if you guys have any other further questions, feel free to reach out to your account team and they will direct your question to us and we'd be happy to get back to you. Freddie, any other closing remarks before we conclude the session here?
No, I mean, I think this has been great. I always love doing a live demo, but the key thing is, if you're interested, please, as you mentioned, Sid, get in contact with your account team. And if you've got feedback, please provide it. We're always listening to the market and our customers. We want to build the best technology there is to solve DEX problems. So if you have feedback, please do get in touch.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.